So today, we're not just going to talk about some billionaire. We're going to dig into an empire that was built on one single massive decision. We're going to trace the path of Jeff Bezos from a garage full of books to a global titan who completely reshaped our world. And in doing so, we have to ask the hard question: what was the real cost of all that ambition? Okay, let's get into it.
Our story, it doesn't start where you'd expect. Not in a boardroom, not in some warehouse, not even online. It begins in a car, with a man about to make a choice that would define the rest of his life. And honestly, in a lot of ways, ours too. And he was crying. But here's the thing. This wasn't a moment of weakness. No, it was a moment of terrifying clarity. You see, those tears, they weren't about his life falling apart. It was the opposite. He was about to tear it all down himself. On purpose. At 30 years old, Jeff Bezos had it all: a huge job on Wall Street, a totally secure future. He was about to throw every bit of that away for a crazy gamble on this new thing called the internet. And that brings us to the real question we're trying to tackle here today. When you look at the incredible convenience, the innovation Amazon brought, and then you put it next to the stories of hollowed-out towns and brutal warehouse conditions, it forces us to ask the one big question, right? When you weigh it all, was it worth it? So how do you even make a choice that big? To understand that, you can't just look at a business plan. You have to get inside the head of the person making the call. And Bezos didn't use a spreadsheet for this. No, he used a powerful mental tool he designed himself. He had this thing he called the framework of regret. Okay, let's go back in time. It's 1994. And you got to remember, the internet back then, it was this weird text-based thing for academics and a few tech geeks. Most people hadn't even heard of a website. Jeff Bezos is the polar opposite of all that. He's a senior VP at a big Wall Street hedge fund, corner office, the whole nine yards. But then he sees one statistic, one piece of data that completely shatters his predictable, successful life path. He sees a revolution coming. He walks into his boss's office, explains this crazy idea for an online bookstore, and he quits. Just like that. A little while later, he and his wife, Mackenzie, are in a car driving across the country. She drives while he's in the passenger seat typing out the business plan for a company that would one day become Amazon. So that number, 2,300%. Let that sink in for a second. That was the annual growth rate of the web. To everybody else on Wall Street, the internet was a toy. But to Bezos, a number like that, that's not just a trend. That's a force of nature. It's like discovering fire. It was a signal that the entire world of business was about to be turned upside down, and he just knew, that sitting on the sidelines would be a way bigger risk than failing. So how does he actually make the call? Well, this is the key. He doesn't open a spreadsheet. He builds an emotional model, the regret minimization framework. It's actually pretty simple but powerful. He pictured himself as an 80-year-old man, looking back on his life, and from that vantage point, he asked, will I regret trying this internet thing and failing? The answer was no. But then he asked the big one, will I regret not even trying? Will I spend the rest of my life wondering, what if? And the answer to that was a huge resounding yes. The fear of that lifelong regret was way heavier than the fear of failing. He was making a choice not for money, but for his own peace of mind. So he does it. He takes the leap. He trades that corner office on Wall Street for a garage in Seattle. And this is where the story gets really gritty. The reality of building a company from absolutely nothing, it was a world away from the glamour of finance. So they land in Bellevue, Washington, and their world headquarters? A garage. And I mean, they were pinching every single penny. Those famous desks made from old doors from Home Depot? That's not a mist. That was real. And their first product? Books. And let's be clear, this wasn't because he was some huge book lover. It was a cold, calculated, and frankly brilliant business move. Why books? Well, there are millions of different titles, way more than any store could ever physically stock. They're all basically the same shape, easy to ship. It was the perfect product to prove his big idea, that an online store could offer a selection that was literally impossible in the real world. And this little story, man, it just perfectly captures what those early days were like. They were so buried in orders that Bezos and the whole tiny team were on their hands and knees on a concrete floor packing boxes. And in the middle of this chaos, Bezos says, hey, we should all get knee pads. But one of his employees shoots back, no, Jeff, we need packing tables. See the difference? That one little moment is Amazon in a nutshell. A brute force approach at first, followed by the realization that building a smarter system is the only way to actually grow. But as that scrappy startup started to grow up, that intensity, it started to curdle into something a lot harsher. This quote,
Are you lazy or just incompetent? This is what employees said he would just say to people in meetings if he thought their work wasn't good enough. It paints a picture of a relentless, some would say brutal, management style where there was just zero tolerance for not being prepared. And this slide right here, it just nails the massive disconnect, right? In his mind, he was just setting high standards, pushing people to be great. But for a lot of the people who actually worked there, it felt a whole lot different. The constant pressure, the critiques, they called it a kind of warfare. The drive to innovate was everything, and the personal toll on the people inside could be incredibly high. So you have this brutal, demanding internal culture, but it was all pointed at one thing, one single obsessive focus. And this focus, this guiding star, it's what would get them through a crisis that literally burned almost everyone else to the ground. That guiding principle was customer obsession. So in '97, Amazon goes public. But Wall Street, they did not get it at all. Investors wanted profits, and Amazon famously had none. They were putting every dollar back into growth. I mean, analysts were openly mocking them. They literally called the company Amazon Bomb. And then in 2000, boom, the whole dot-com bubble just spectacularly implodes. Companies that were worth billions one day were worthless the next. It was an absolute fire sale. And Amazon is right in the middle of this absolute bloodbath. Their stock price drops 90%. Just gone. Imagine that. For every dollar of value the company had, 90 cents just evaporated. For any other CEO, this is panic time. The media was basically writing their obituary. But inside Amazon, Jeff Bezos was calm, like unnervingly calm. While the rest of the world was freaking out, he just kept showing up to work, totally focused. Why? Because he wasn't playing their game. They were all watching the stock price. He was watching his customers. It was like everyone else was watching a horror movie for the first time, and he'd already seen it and knew how it ended. So what was his secret? How could he be so calm? It all goes back to this core belief, this almost religious philosophy he called customer obsession. The philosophy is dead simple, but it's everything. You don't start with your competitors. You don't even start with what you're good at. You start with the customer, and you work backwards. What do they want? Cheaper prices, faster delivery, more stuff to choose from? Okay, now invent whatever you need to make that happen. He truly believed if you just did that relentlessly, everything else, the profits, the stock price, would eventually take care of itself. He was playing the long game. And this way of thinking, it led to two of the craziest, most counterintuitive gambles in business history. First, Amazon Prime. His own finance guys literally told him it was financial suicide to offer unlimited 2-day shipping for one flat fee. The numbers just didn't work. But Bezos saw it differently. He knew it would change how people shop, get them hooked. Today, over 200 million members. Then there's Amazon Web Services, AWS. People were completely baffled. They were like, wait, you sell books? Why are you getting into the web server business? But he saw they'd built this massive, world-class computer system for themselves, so why not rent it out? Today, AWS is the most profitable part of Amazon and powers half the internet. While those crazy gambles, they paid off, big time, on a scale that's honestly hard to even wrap your head around. And with that kind of success came an insane amount of wealth. But, when you reach the very top of the mountain, that's when a whole new set of problems starts to show up. By 2018, Jeff Bezos wasn't just the richest person alive. He was the richest person in modern history. His net worth soared past $150 billion. I mean, get this. At one point, his net worth was going up by more money every second than most people make in a whole month. It's just a staggering level of wealth that's hard to even imagine. But you know what they say, the higher you climb, the harder you can fall. And right at the absolute peak of his power, everything started to crack. First crack, January 2019, the divorce from McKinsey, the woman who was there from day one. And then came the whole tabloid firestorm, leaked texts, a public affair, the whole messy deal. The National Enquirer tried to blackmail him with it, but then, in this absolutely stunning move, instead of backing down, he goes on the attack. He publishes the entire blackmail attempt himself in a blog post, basically daring them. It was a total power play, turning a moment of humiliation into a show of force. But while everyone was glued to this personal soap opera,
A much bigger story was starting to bubble up from inside his own company. A rebellion was starting, not from his rivals, but from the people who were actually packing the boxes.
Suddenly, we started hearing these stories from inside those giant Amazon warehouses. And they weren't about innovation. They were about the human cost. We're talking about grueling quotas, timed bathroom breaks, and this idea that people were basically being treated like parts in a machine, used up and then thrown away. It created this huge, glaring contradiction. A company built on obsessing over the customer was now being accused of completely forgetting about the human being packing that customer's box. And all that simmering anger, it finally exploded in 2021. For decades, Amazon had crushed every attempt to unionize. But then, this little group of workers in Staten Island, led by this guy Chris Smalls, they did the unthinkable. They won. They voted to form the first ever Amazon union in the US. I mean, this was a pure David and Goliath moment, a true underdog story. The guy who beat all his corporate rivals was finally challenged from his own factory floor. That union vote, it was a real turning point. It was bigger than just one warehouse. It forced everybody to start having a much bigger conversation about what this whole Amazon thing really means, the true cost of it all. Which brings us to the final chapter of his time at the top. And then, in July of 2021, Jeff Bezos does something almost as shocking as starting the company in the first place. He leaves. After 27 years, the man who was Amazon steps down as CEO. He hands over the keys to the empire he built. So what's the first thing he does with all his new free time? 11 days later, he launches himself into space, straps into a rocket from his other company, Blue Origin, and for a few minutes he's floating, looking down at the planet he completely changed. And yeah, it was this incredible visual, but the timing, wow. It sparked this huge debate. You know, billionaires flying to space while all these problems of inequality are happening right here on the ground. And that moment, really, it just perfectly captures the two sides of his legacy, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the genius, the guy who totally rewired how we all shop, the guy who made overnight delivery just normal, who built the digital cloud we all live in. But on the other side, you have the cost, the accountability, all the small businesses that got hollowed out, the creation of this huge invisible workforce pushed to its limits, a focus on the future that many say completely forgot about the people in the present. And nothing makes that contrast clearer than what his ex-wife, Mackenzie Scott, started doing. She gets $38 billion in the divorce and almost immediately starts giving it away, billions and billions of it, to charities, food banks, community colleges, a lot of the very places dealing with the fallout of this new economy. And get this, she did it quietly. No big press conferences, no fancy galas, no rocket ships. For a lot of people, watching her systematically give that wealth away, it felt like a powerful silent statement. So this all brings us right back to the beginning, right? Back to that guy in the car trying to minimize his regret. By his own standard, did he succeed? Oh yeah, on a scale that is just mind-boggling. But history plays by a different set of rules. It doesn't just ask if you won. History asks the tougher questions. It asks, at what cost? And who paid that price for you? The man who bought tomorrow created a world of unbelievable convenience, but he also left the rest of us with the bill. And that final calculation? Well, that's the question his empire leaves behind for all of us to figure out.